Imagine this. You're alone in a quiet room. No phone. No noise. Just you, the walls, and your thoughts. At first, it's peaceful, maybe even soothing. But then, slowly, something shifts. Your mind begins to stir. A memory you've buried rises, uninvited. A question without an answer follows. Then comes the storm, doubts, regrets, unspoken fears. And now you're pacing, or fidgeting, or desperate to check your phone. Not because of boredom, but because of something far more unsettling. You're trying to escape your own mind. But the rock behind the sword that asks, why do you pretend? Or what are you compensating for? Or worse, what have you become? Messages from parts of yourself exiled long ago because they were inconvenient, or painful, or simply too strange. Imagine whole emotional ecosystems, buried like forgotten cities beneath the polished civilization of your daily personality. A shadow archive of things you didn't say, emotions you didn't process, instincts you feared to trust. Work, grind, achieve. All these frantic loops of doing not to discover yourself, but to avoid yourself. It's not technology that enslaves us. It's our willingness to be enslaved, to let the noise drown out the silence we secretly dread. In the quiet, your mind does not flatter. It reveals the realization that beneath the social masks, the polite compromises, the learned helplessness, there lies a being capable of immense clarity, even madness, even godhood. But to meet the being, you'd have to go where no distractions can protect you. You'd have to strip away everything borrowed, every idea implanted, every belief inherited, every opinion mimicked. Why? You've lived with this mind for as long as you've existed. It has shaped your decisions, imagined your dreams, whispered your desires, but your buried strength. Yet when left alone with it, when silence gives it the space to speak freely, you flinch, you run, you distract. But for those who do, something shatters. But deep down, it's something else. It's not time that keeps people from turning inward. It's fear. A primal, bone-deep fear. The crumbling of the fragile narrative you tell yourself in order to sleep at night. Because if you look too closely, you might discover you've been living a story written by fear, by conditioning, by wounds passed down like heirlooms. But a signpost to whisper from something vast and real within you, asking you to stop looking away. But internally fractured, pulled between masks, haunted by half-buried thoughts, and ruled by impulses they do not understand. The chaos doesn't come from the outside world alone. It brews within, in the shadowed corners of the psyche where the unacknowledged self waits. Patient and watching, the same kind that flickers in your gut when you hear a strange sound in a dark hallway. The fear of encountering something you cannot explain, or worse, cannot control. Society builds the cage first. You're rewarded for obedience, praised for conformity, and quietly punished for straying too far from the norm. But because we are so obsessed with how we are perceived that we construct entire personalities around imagined judgments. You don't just fear your own thoughts, you fear that others might glimpse them. And so you build layers, layers upon layers, until even you forget what lies at the core. That you're mature now, that your numbness is peace. But peace doesn't feel like this, does it? Peace doesn't feel like something hollowed out and painted over. This system doesn't just shape behavior, it shapes identity. It teaches you to suppress what doesn't fit, so you amputate your wildness, your darkness, your intensity. And the bill is always paid in self-alienation. About your relationships, about your work, about the stories you tell just to get through the day. So we lock it away. It sees the parts of yourself you keep buried behind polite smiles and curated posts. It knows when you're lying to others, yes, but especially to yourself. And the guilt you can't explain, and the restlessness that haunts your stillest moments, and the existential weight that presses down when you lie awake at 3 a.m. wondering, is this all there is? Power becomes evil. Desire becomes shame. Suffering becomes virtue. You start to live around your mind, rather than through it. That suffering can become strength if it is faced. That the void within the self is not a curse, but an invitation. You trust appearances more than instincts. And eventually, you stop asking questions not because you found answers, but because you've learned not to look too closely. Easy to distract, easy to deceive. We adapt, but in the worst way possible, by convincing ourselves that our suppression is morality. But when you abandon it, when you fear it, others learn to control it for you. Through advertising, through ideology, through fear. And slowly, the most sacred thing you possess, your capacity for self-awareness, is outsourced. And what remains is a version of yourself that is palatable to others but foreign to your own soul. What kind of paradox is this, that the one place no one else can enter, the sacred ground of your own consciousness, is the very place you avoid most? And perhaps he was right in one sense. Once you peel back the distractions, what remains is a rawness most aren't equipped to face. Because true awareness brings with it responsibility. Responsibility for your choices, for your beliefs, for the narratives you've swallowed and the ones you've spun. The philosopher Aldous Huxley once warned that the real danger was not oppression by pain, but addiction to pleasure, that we would come to love our servitude, a sense that this avoidance of the mind, this subtle self-estrangement, is not an isolated discomfort. It is not just personal, it is systemic, widespread, cultural, and it has consequences so vast, so interwoven into the fabric of daily existence, that most people live their entire lives under its spell without ever realizing what it cost them. And what is more seductive than the comfort of distraction, the dull narcotic of constant stimulation, keeping us from ever having to ask, what do I truly want? And inside the prison, the most dangerous part is not that you're locked in. And it's much easier to hand the burden off to someone else, a system, a religion, a culture, a job, a screen. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the repressed, rejected, denied parts of ourselves we exile because they contradict our ideal self-image. So the more you deny your inner world, the more it leaks through the cracks in dreams, in slips of the tongue, in sudden rage or inexplicable sadness, celebrating performance, but terrified of stillness. Because in stillness, the mind begins to speak, and what it says might dismantle the entire identity you've built. The mind never forgets, it simply waits. What begins as a whisper of doubt becomes depression, apathy, burnout. These aren't just mental health issues, they're warning lights, signals, the psyche crying out under the weight of years of ignored truth. It is not just our flaws that live there, but also our forgotten passions, our unlived potentials, our deepest truths. And because we banish these parts, they fester. And when they finally surface through anxiety, projection, addiction, or despair, we call it madness. We institutionalize it, but it's not madness, it's the return of the real. Could it be that your mind knows truths you've refused to hear? There's something terrifying about unfiltered introspection. Not the self-help variety filled with affirmations and goal setting. Relationships forged more from fear of loneliness than love. Leaders driven not by vision, but by ego compensation. Entire political systems that exploit emotional unawareness, fear, tribalism, resentment as fuel. What if the thoughts you suppress are not random noise, but signals? And then you realize most people prefer not to explore this place. They say they're too busy, or that it's unproductive. Have you ever noticed how society equips you with endless ways to flee your own awareness? Scroll, click, stream, chat. And perhaps the most insidious part, you can live an entire life this way and be congratulated for it. But here's the deeper contradiction. We long to be understood, to be seen for who we truly are. And yet, we hide from the very self that cries out to be known. What are we so afraid of? Projection, image. Maybe it's not just the darkness we fear. Maybe it's the power. And that's a death of sorts, isn't it? The death of identity as you've known it. What if your mind has been knocking at the door for years, waiting for you to stop running? Imagine if silence could speak. What would it say about you? If the person you pretend to be had to face the one you truly are without filters, without excuses, who would win the confrontation? What if the voice you suppress is not your weakness? What if your discomfort with your own mind is not a flaw? Most people will never face it. Most will live entire lives in the outskirts of their own consciousness, forever orbiting around their true core, never daring to land. And something awakens. Now ask yourself this not as a passing thought, but as a question to burn into your bones. If you don't master your own mind, who will? Or worse, what already has? There is a quiet tragedy in how the modern individual walks through life, composed on the outside. But how did we get here? Why does the average person recoil from introspection like it is a mirror reflecting a face they'd rather not recognize? To understand this, we must descend into the psychological caverns mapped by the thinkers who dare to explore the human interior. Jung warned that what you resist not only persists, but grows stronger. But repression is not born in a vacuum. From early childhood, you are trained to be acceptable, not true acceptable. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote that hell is other people, not because human connection is inherently cruel, and in that forgetting, a different kind of suffering is born, one that cannot be named. Friedrich Nietzsche called it resentment, a sickly self-loathing that grows when we are unable to confront our true feelings, so we invert them. You tell yourself you've outgrown your wildness. Arthur Schopenhauer, that relentless excavator of the human condition, believed that consciousness is suffering, that to be aware is to ache. But every escape comes at a cost. You begin to feel like a stranger inside your own skin. This is the hidden architecture of modern life, a society designed not to awaken minds, but to occupy them. Because here lies the root of the problem. Most people don't fear their mind because it's chaotic. They fear it because it's honest. Your mind knows what you really feel about your life. And in a world that rewards performance over authenticity, honesty becomes dangerous. But it doesn't disappear. It waits and dreams. The mind is not the enemy. It is the terrain. You become easy to guide. And that is no accident. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the unspeakable horrors of the Holocaust, understood something most modern people have forgotten. That meaning is not found in comfort, but in confrontation. But most will never accept an invitation because it asks too much. It asks you to stop running, to turn inward, to listen, to confront the war you've been waging against yourself and ask not how to win, but why it started in the first place. And so we arrive at a question more dangerous than any other. What happens when the mind you've silenced all your life finally begins to speak louder than your distractions can drown out? That question is not theoretical. For some, it has already begun, and for others it's only a matter of time. By now, something has probably begun to stir in you a recognition. Perhaps faint, perhaps loud. This is not just a crisis of the individual. This is the architecture of unconsciousness at quiet. Invisible machinery humming beneath every decision, every fear, every dream deferred. And its first casualty is your freedom. Because how free can you truly be if you don't know who is thinking your thoughts? If you've never questioned the origin of your desires? If your reactions are just the echoes of old wounds masquerading as instinct? This is the unseen prison, the unexamined mind, conditioned by algorithms, social norms, childhood wounds, and inherited beliefs, yet parading around as you. It's that you stop trying to get out. And you're not alone. We are a culture drunk on stimulation, but starved of insight, sedated by surface pleasures, addicted to speed. So we run faster, chase louder things, scroll, swipe, buy, hustle anything to avoid sitting alone with a storm beneath our skin. But avoidance always compounds. The feelings you suppress don't fade. They ferment. What starts as a flicker of discomfort becomes chronic anxiety. You were never meant to live divided from yourself. And when that divide grows too wide, consequences begin to spill outward, not just within your own life, but into the very structures of society. Look around. The collective result of a population estranged from their own minds is not peace. It is performative harmony masking a psychic war. It is workplaces filled with people who don't know why they're working. We don't just avoid the truth within ourselves. We elect it, we marry it, we consume it, because it feels familiar. And familiarity, even when it's toxic, feels safer than the terrifying work of self-integration. But let's get closer. Let's get personal. The consequence of fearing your mind is not just theoretical. It is felt in quiet, soul-eroding moments. It's the ache when you succeed at something and feel nothing. It's the subtle panic in moments of silence where your thoughts grow too loud. It's the unspoken shame of not knowing why you're sad or angry or exhausted, but knowing it's been that way for years. It's the inability to be truly present with someone you love, because part of you is always hiding even from them. This isn't living, this is coping. It is a way of being that keeps you perpetually out of sync with yourself, always chasing, never arriving. You can be called successful, stable, even enlightened, because the world doesn't reward inner clarity. It rewards compliance. But inwardly, you will always know something is missing. That missing piece is not a thing. It is you. The you that you've locked away because it didn't fit the mold. The you that had inconvenient questions. The you that burned too brightly for a world addicted to dim lights. Neuroscience backs this too. The brain's default mode network active when we're not focused on external tasks lights up during self-referential thought, reflection, imagination, and emotional processing. Yet we spend most of our waking hours in task mode, externally, distracted, never giving this network the bandwidth to operate fully. We silence our internal processing and then wonder why we feel so disoriented, so uncentered. Your mind is not malfunctioning, it's unheard, and like a muscle ignored too long, it atrophies not in raw intelligence, but in wisdom, in self-recognition, in the ability to navigate the inner world without being hijacked by it. And that's the worst part, isn't it? You don't just fear your thoughts. You begin to believe you are your thoughts. The anxious thought means you are anxious. The angry thought means you are angry. The intrusive thought means you are broken. But this is a lie, a trick of identification. Your thoughts are not you. They are weather passing through your inner sky. But if you never pause long enough to see that sky, if you only ever fight the storms, you'll never realize the peace that was there all along. And this, ignorance doesn't just rob you of peace, it robs you of potential. Every invention, every masterpiece, every revolutionary act began in a mind that dared to listen to itself, even when it was terrifying, even when it contradicted everything society wanted. Einstein once said, "A calm and modest life brings more happiness than the pursuit of success combined with constant restlessness." But how many truly seek calm, modesty, inner silence? These things don't trend on social media. They don't sell products. They awaken something far more dangerous to the status quo: awareness. Because a person who knows themselves truly, painfully, courageously cannot be manipulated in the same way. They don't buy for approval. They don't vote from fear. They don't stay silent to be accepted. They live from the inside out. And that kind of person is rare. Not because it's impossible, but because most people never survive the gauntlet of their own mind long enough to emerge on the other side. But now the question is this: what if you do? What if this discomfort you felt, the restlessness, the dread, the sense that you're not fully alive, is not a curse, but a calling, a signal, a rebellion waiting to be born? Most people live as prisoners, but without chains, without walls, and without a guard. Their cell is internal, invisible, built from beliefs they never chose, fears they never questioned, and values they inherited like a family heirloom they never examined. But the door was never locked. The tragedy is not imprisonment. It is forgetting the cell exists at all. Yet there are moments, quiet, jarring, impossible to unfeel, when the illusion flickers. When a thought arrives that doesn't belong to the script. A raw, rogue question like, what if everything I've built is based on a lie? Or who am I when I stop performing? That question can become the match, the crack, the heresy that sparks a rebellion. And it starts Not with violence, not with noise, but with turning inward. You stop running. You sit with the chaos. You listen. It will feel like dying, and in some sense, it is. The death of your false self. The crumbling of the image you've spent years constructing for approval, safety, or survival. And like any death, it comes with grief. You grieve the time you lost betraying your instincts. You grieve the years you wore masks so convincingly that even you forgot they were masks. But then you start to hear something new, something old, something true. A voice that's been buried beneath 1,000 layers of noise whispers from your authentic mind. Not the conditioned one, not the performative one, but the one that remembers, the one that knows. This is the beginning of freedom. And freedom, real freedom, always looks like madness to those who are still shackled. Think of the heretics of history, the mystics, the dissidents, the artists who refused to conform. Many were cast out, labeled insane, dangerous, foolish. But they saw something the world refused to see. That awakening is a threat to every structure built on unconsciousness. They dared to trust their own minds over the collective trance. You can do the same, but you must be willing to disobey not society, but the voice inside you that says, don't go there. That inner authority that guards the door to your psyche like a frightened parent, warning that you're not ready, that it's too dark, too messy, too much. You must go anyway, and when you do, you'll discover a powerful truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who observes them. You are the stillness beneath the storm. You are the awareness capable of watching fear without becoming fear. This shift, this detachment from thought is not dissociation. It's awakening. And you don't need years of meditation in a monastery to find it. You need only one thing: the courage to pause. To be still long enough to watch your mind without trying to change it. Because when you do, you'll notice something strange. Most of the thoughts that torment you aren't even yours. They are echoes, recycled slogans, generational fears, cultural noise, religious guilt, parental expectations, trauma patterns. You inherited them. You absorbed them. But you do not have to keep them. Question everything. Why do I believe this? Where did this idea come from? Does this emotion belong to me? Or was it planted there by someone else? Socrates called it the unexamined life. Jung called it individuation. Sartre called it authenticity. It doesn't matter what name you give it, only that you begin. Because rebellion is not the act of burning down the world. It is the act of claiming your mind as your own. It is reading what challenges you. It is feeling what terrifies you. It is choosing values that match your soul, not your surroundings. It is saying, I will no longer abandon myself for belonging. And slowly, the inner architecture begins to shift. What used to be fear becomes fuel. What used to be confusion becomes clarity. The voices that once felt like enemies, your doubts, your shame, your anger become guides. They were never there to destroy you. They were waiting to be heard, and you begin to rebuild, not in reaction to fear, but in alignment with truth. Maybe you cut off toxic relationships not out of hurt, because they no longer resonate with your new friends. Maybe you leave a career that numbs you not because you have a better plan, but because your soul is starved. Maybe you change nothing on the outside, but inside, the tectonic plates of identity have shifted forever. You are no longer operating for survival. You are choosing to regulate, consciously, mildly, and others will notice. Some will fear you. Some will try to bring you back to the old ways. Some will leave, let them. Liberation is not a performance. It is a revolution. Quiet, sacred, unstoppable. And from this rebellion comes power, not ability to remain silent in chaos, to think clearly when others panic, to love deeply without losing yourself, to act with integrity even when no one is watching. This is what we call to self, the coming home.